Hello everyone and welcome back to another deck guide, this time featuring the weirdest archetype maybe ever released, Enneacraft. This flip pendulum burn archetype is it's a flip pendulum burn archetype that plays a highly controlling strategy and barely ever touches the extra deck. So if you're looking for a new way to play and maybe you like giant robotic animals, then let's get started. So we're going to go through this a little differently than normal, because the shared mechanics of the deck are more important than the individual effects. Notably, we don't actually pendulum summon. All of our scales are 0. That's because we just use the pen scales as spell effects. There are two types of Enneacraft, the level 1s and the level 9s. The level 1s all share the scale ability to reveal 3 Enneacraft names from deck and randomly add one to hand. You don't have to show different names, so if you have 3 of everything, you can just add anything you want at any time. And you can use this effect once per turn per Enneacraft name. There's 4 level 1s, so theoretically that's 4 searches per turn. The level 9s also share a scale ability, though it's less important but still pretty good. At the end of the battle phase, if you have a level 9 scaled and another Ennea in the other pendulum scale, you can destroy a monster your opponent controls with less attack than the level 9. They're all 3000 attack, so you can pop anything below that, and if you have 2 different level 9s scaled, that's 2 pops at the end of every battle phase. Then we have some effects shared by the 1s and the 9s. First up, if any of them are scaled and a monster on board is flipped, you add a counter to the scale. That's where the burn comes in. The field spell here removes all counters from our scales each end phase to burn the opponent for 900 per counter removed. This can very quickly kill the opponent in like a turn or two in this deck, which is super important because we don't really attack much and we aren't trying to. And the last shared effect is that any Enneacraft can reveal in hand to summon a monster from your hand to your field face down. Any monster. And this effect is not once per turn, but it locks you into only special summoning face down for the entire turn. That means our extra deck is basically superfluous. We can effectively never use it. It does, however, let us summon out our entire hand without revealing what they are, which is incredibly powerful, especially since every one of our cards has a different flip effect. With all of that explained, we can move on to the individual cards. Each has a trigger that lets you flip it like a trap, and then an effect when it is flipped. So Ecto, as our first one, can flip when the opponent activates a card that special summons a monster, then lets you add an Ennea card from your deck to your hand. Then, when flipped either by that effect or by being attacked in battle or by any means, it also lets you negate an opponent's monster until end of turn. That's the basic structure for every Ennea. Flip, gain value, then trigger a disruptive flip effect. Proto flips when they activate a monster effect in hand, adds a card, then destroys a monster. Ennato flips when they activate a card in grave or banishment, adds a card, and then shuffles in 3 from their grave/banishment. Lastly, for the level 1s is Deftero, which flips when they add a card from deck to hand, adds a card, and then banishes a random card from the opponent's hand until end phase. The level 9s are a little different. They're more disruptive, but provide less value. These are the better end board pieces, but you rely on the level 1s to let you grind since this is absolutely a control deck. Atori is the best monster in the deck. It flips when the opponent activates any card or effect on your turn to negate and destroy. Then its flip effect Book of Moons the opponent's board and makes them unable to flip back over. Ever. Finding a way to flip this on the opponent's turn is unbelievably important, and it insulates us going second if we just open it, reveal a small Ennea, summon the Atori, and then we have a negate and a book online without the opponent knowing. Isa flips when they respond to our card or effect, then returns 3 cards from field to hand. Once flipped, it burns the opponent for 900 every time they add a card to hand to help us close out the game. Asta flips whenever they target one of our cards with an effect to negate that effect, and then once flipped, The opponent can no longer target cards on field or in graves, ours or theirs. Lastly, for monsters, Arca flips when our opponent tries to destroy a card and makes all of our monsters and Ennea's spells indestructible for the turn. Then once flipped, it burns for 900 each time one or more monsters get sent to our opponent's graveyard. You with me so far? Good. Let's get into our weird-ass spell lineup. Enneopolis is our field spell and win condition. As mentioned earlier, it removes counters on every end phase to burn for huge chunks of damage, and it also lets us return Ennea monster cards from field to hand. That means we can use the level ones to search as pendulum scales, then bounce them to our hand, then set them to act as disruptions for the opponent's turn. Lastly, when an Ennea gets flipped, you can choose to move it to a pendulum zone or put it back in hand to use it again later. Release puts an Ennea from deck into your pendulum scale, which acts as a starter. Then you can banish it from grave to add an Ennea from the extra deck back to hand in case one of them gets destroyed at some point. Reverth lets you shuffle any number of Enneas from hand or field back into the deck to draw that many cards. That lets you refuel using already flipped Enneas since they lose a lot of value once they've been flipped. It's also one of the best ways to flip our whale on the opponent's turn, since you can banish it when the opponent summons a monster, to special an Ennea from hand, or flip one that's already on the field. Then we're on some unique but very important non-engine. Sol and Luna is a quick play that lets us flip one of our monsters and one of our opponent's monsters at the same time. That's the other way that we're flipping the whale on their turn, so it acts as a trap that can just basically book their field at will. Since we play pretty well going second, one triple tack can help us push through an established board or just punish the opponent for using hand traps on us, which aren't very good against us anyways. 3 Karma Cannons reset our flip monsters so we can use them again while also breaking the opponent's board. This card is incredibly powerful in any deck and even more so here. And then lastly, we play 3 Purges as our only hand traps since all the Enneas are light and earth, and that makes us resistant to triple tactics cards from our opponent. In the sideboard are a couple of options for tech if you want to personalize the deck a little. A lot of people like Eclipse in this deck because it resets our Enneas face down to use them again. I hated it when I tried it. You don't destroy the monsters you book basically ever, so the opponent almost always draws 2 to 4 cards when you use it, and you just lose even if it does reset your flip effects. More interesting in my opinion is Spirit of the Fall Wind. We can't special summon outside of face downs, but we can sure normal summon, and the deck doesn't use its normal summon in engine, so having one that just searches any other monster in the deck is pretty solid, but we're consistent enough that I haven't felt the need to call her in yet. The extra deck here sees basically no play. It's all super niche options. I think the only things in here I've ever actually summoned were the Linkuriboh and the Relinquished Anima. But if it gets to turn 3 and you have bodies you want to do something with, you can use Anima to steal a monster, SP to help break a board. Zealantis in theory can flip your board back face down while helping you break the opponent's, but in practice it'll never happen since he takes 4 bodies on board in the first place, and you can't summon any of the Enneas during the turn you summon him, so you have to go through the opponent's turn, survive with 4, and then still, for some reason, need to use Zealantis. It just doesn't really come up. Ripplebird prevents attacks. Nightingale lets you set up a Zeus. The generators are disruptions you can make with leftover level 9 bodies. Aggregator can send a Tis to pop a card, then you can rank it up into Pain Gainer to burn and pop the board, while sending Aggregator to the grave to negate something as well. Then you can rank that up into 7 Sins, which is a giant protected body that can banish the board if it survives a turn. Typhon is Typhon. Again, you basically never use any of this thanks to the hard lock on the Enneas, but you might as well have the options since we don't gain benefit in the way that Monarchs does for not having an extra deck. So, might as well. And that's it. Hopefully this will make a lot more sense once you see it in practice. Okay, so I don't consider this a 1-card combo deck, but we do technically have 15 cards that can do this. So this can be done with any of the level 1s or the spell that just places something face up in the pendulum zone. Let's go, I guess. So we're going to scale. That allows us to reveal 3 of another level 1, which automatically gets that, which allows us to reveal 3 of the field spell, which lets us get the field spell. And then we can use that to bounce the 2 that we got, and then special summon those both from hand. And that's it. This gives us, with these 2 specific level 1s, these are probably the best 2 that you're going to get. This is a Monster Destruction and a Monster Negate, and both of those effects get us more cards for next turn, and then we can reset them again if Enneapolis survives. It's 2 disruptions with lots of follow-up off of 1 card, and we have 15 copies of this in deck. You should hopefully draw more engine than that. It would be quite disastrous if you don't, but that is the 1 card combo that the deck can do. Cool? Cool. Okay, so rather than another combo, I'm just going to show you my half of this game, just to kind of walk you through what we're doing. So we are up against Killer Toon, and they have set up their own board, cool, whatever. They banished a Karma Cannon, who cares? We've got a rather good hand that's going to display some of our various effects so that you can see how these actually work, and I've slowed the game down pretty significantly, and I'll pause if needed. Here we go. So we draw an even better card, and so what we do, first off the bat, is we reveal the Ecto, because the opponent knowing we have Ecto doesn't really do much. But that lets us set a Tori without them knowing that we have the Atori. So we now have an Omni Negate and Destroy and Book online, which is incredibly dangerous, especially when they don't know that we have it. So then we're going to use the same card, because if we use the same card repeatedly, that's the only card they know we have in hand, so we can set the rest of our big disruptions. So Arca prevents our stuff from being destroyed, and Isa lets us bounce their board if they trigger its effect. So before the opponent has been able to do literally anything to stop us, we have an incredibly terrifying board if they try to do anything. So we're going to keep going, and then we're going to reveal 1 more and summon our last boss monster. This was like a really good hand where we have all 4 of our boss monsters, and we can put them all out. Of course, we play a starter that's gonna like do combo stuff, and the opponent's like, well, I don't want to let you do that, so we're gonna pop your starter. That's a really bad move on their part, because we have a better established board right now than they do, as you're about to see. So we can respond with Asta when they target one of our cards to negate the effect and banish something from hand. They respond to that by activating Q to summon and try to synchro right now, because it might get banished from hand otherwise, but because they activated a monster effect in hand, we can then go Isa. Isa's going to let us bounce everything effectively. So we just negated their disruption, we bounced half of their board, they don't get to synchro summon, we still resolve our Ecto to search the field spell, so we can activate the field spell, and they go, okay, Killer Toon synchro, we're going to do things either way. And this is where we basically are like, okay, you have nothing left in hand to do, so we're going to activate a Tori to negate that, book your board, and then we've got an extra body on field. They give up at this point. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. We established the same effective board going first, but it's really neat that going second, we can establish this kind of board before we try to do any sort of combo, so we can fight through whatever the opponent has established, and if they have not established like a crazy combo lock you out of the game type of board, we can probably contest it and just win anyways, which I think is one of the coolest things about this deck, that like, I'm going to put my cards on the table before you can interact with anything, and they are immediately live and will contest your board. It's pretty frickin' sick. Cool? Cool. And we're back with closing thoughts on our Enneacraft deck. So, as far as pros go, the biggest one for this entire deck is that it's incredibly unique, and to me that makes it really fun to play. It's just like very different from what anyone else is trying to do. It's harder to interact with than a lot of decks because it's playing on that different axis. And like, it works. It is a functional deck that can compete despite being weird, and that's really neat, and I hope they do more of that in the future. As far as cons, I'm looking at this guy right here. When your opponent activates a card or effect, negate is an incredibly powerful effect. When your opponent activates a card or effect on your turn, negate is much less so. And that's kind of the story with Enneacraft. This deck will never be particularly good because all of their disruptions are incredibly powerful, but they're far too conditional. If a Tori was on your turn or the opponent's turn, if it was just an Omni Negate and Destroy, I think this deck would be competitive. And then if you started to relax the locks on some of these other cards to make them a little bit less conditional, I think it would be an incredibly powerful deck because it's already super, super consistent, and it can go second better than most decks nowadays, and it can grind pretty well. That's the other con, is that it doesn't grind amazingly. You're kind of reliant on like Reverth, draw you into more cards to reuse bodies. You saw in that example that at the end of that, I was going to have 3 bodies face up that aren't really doing much, so I would have used Enneapolis, like bounce them and set them again. That's kind of what you're trying to do for the grind game, and there are ways to interact with that and stop that from occurring, and if the opponent can like destroy Enneapolis or counter your Reverth, your grind game gets much, much worse. But you can also kill someone really quick, so how long do you really need to grind? So yeah, I don't know, not much else to say. Very interesting deck, very unique, give it a try. It's not easy to play because you have to rewire your brain to do it right. You might look at it, see no hand traps, and think, oh, that can't be competitive or good. And it is, because your hand traps are the monsters you summon from hand before the opponent can interact with them. That's just like, they're board breakers. All of your biggest boss monsters are board breakers in and of themselves, similar to Kashtira, so you have to do less work stopping the opponent from initially setting up, because you'll just like Karma Cannon them, you'll Atorimar them, you'll bounce everything with Aiza, just all sorts of fun stuff on your turn going second, so you don't have to worry about stopping them in the first place. But anyways, that's gonna be it, guys. I hope you learned something this time, because I know this is weird and unique, but I did put a lot of hours in practicing and playing games and learning how to play it. Lost a whole lot while figuring it out. But I think I got there, and I think I got some good games out of it. So I hope you liked it, and I hope to see you next time. Well, bye.